Hello everyone, greetings for the day. So I hope all of you are doing really well. And so in today's cash flow statement session, we'll be trying to look at directly at the practical solution, right? So I hope you people have gone through this PPT and have understood what actually cash flow statement is and its relevance. We all know cash flow statement is a part of a financial statement. So what are the different financial statements which are more prominent in usage? So one such is the balance sheet, the other is statement of affairs, and the third one would be cash flow statement, and the fourth one would be notes to accounts. So we understand that cash flow statement has a large amount of relevancy when it comes to its usage. So if there are any doubts, I hope those are resolved by now. We particularly know a few things about cash flow statement, that there are three types of activities which we are trying to inculcate into the cash flow statement, which are the operating, financing, and investing activities. And we are trying to segregate those activities based on the data which we are provided in the question itself. So we'll head on to the question itself right now. I hope you are able to see my screen as well. So let's move it. Yes. So this was the problem question which we got during the session. We have to prepare a cash flow statement of Suryan Limited from the following data. So this was the data provided, the balance sheet as on the opening balances and the closing balances of all the items which are assets and liabilities. And there was also some additional information provided in the question, right? So now we'll move on and head to the answer part. So I'll be toggling between the two tabs. So please don't mind, right? And one more thing, like this video might be reaching out to you a bit late because actually I was having a mild cold and all. So now I'm like now I'm feeling really well. So this is something nice. So this session will really be helpful for you for your understanding. So we'll move on with the question. So first, to understand how to solve the question, it's better that we divide the question into bits and pieces. Now you would say, what bits and pieces? We'll try to segregate activities and the format. If we try to look on the screen, you see that this is the format of cash flow statement which we follow. First, we have the items related to operating activities. Then we have items related to investing activities, then financing, and then we will move on to under to compute the net cash and cash equivalents, or else the net value of actual cash flows during the year for company. So as you all should know that cash flow statement is also an yearly statement, just like we have a balance sheet. So whenever we are writing as a format, we can write a heading like cash flows for the year ending 2018 to 2019, like that. So these are the formats you can follow. So this is the basic premise of this. Now we'll head on towards the answer part, right? So what we saw, just like we saw that cash flow from operating activities is the first one we are trying to solve. So as you have already learned, I will be asking you questions, but I know you won't be able to answer me through this video. But then I'll give you a gap to think about it, just a 5-second gap, okay? So there were two methods in operating activities. Can you name them? So the two methods in operating activities, one was indirect method and another was direct method. So most popularly, the indirect method of computing the operating activities part is widely used, and the direct method is less frequently used. So I'll give you another question. What was the starting point when we started off with the indirect method of computing operating activities? Can you remember? Can you recall? So I'll help you out. So it was the net profit where we started off from. So the balance which is there in the net profit is the one where we start off from. So when we try to move on with the question, we'll try to see what is the amount provided for net profit. So right now, when you actually go through this question, you'll find that there's nothing like net profit, but we see something as retained earnings, right? So we can focus on this and try to prepare a account, ledger account. I hope you people are at least versed, not well versed, if not well versed, but then at least have a general understanding about what ledger accounts are and how do they operate. If not, we'll have to learn that as well, because we cannot completely cover entire thing, because that's a base of accounts, right? So first we'll try to see through here, like profit before tax and extraordinary items. Now we see the amount as 55,000 and it is note number 1. So we'll quickly move to the note number 1 part. So this is note number 1, and now we are trying to calculate net profit before tax and extraordinary items. So for that, we are picking up data from our sheet. So the data which we have provided here is opening balance of retained earnings 60,000. 90,000 is the closing balance. This means that there is a 30,000 increase in retained earnings, right? So to compute that, we'll move on to our sheet. So we see that 90,000 was the closed retained earnings and 60,000 was the opening retained earnings. So 30,000 was the retained earnings for this particular year, right? So we'll try to add back those items. So first, one important point I missed out. Whenever we are trying to solve this question, just identify the items which are present in the question, which activity can they belong to. So this will help you in easily breaking down the question. Okay. So first thing what we are trying to understand is this is the net earnings during the year. So retained earnings during the year, I'll just name it. Okay, retained earnings during the year. During the year. So this is the retained earnings during the year, which is 30,000 rupees, which we see. Now, what we are attempting to do through this question is that net profit say upon we are backtracking and we are reaching to the figure of outflow regarding operating activities. So we have to make sure that if we want to derive at the actual figure of cash flows, then we have to reverse all the entries which we did. Usually what do? We write sales, then we reduce variable cost, we reduce fixed cost, and we derive at net profit. And in between we also have different items like expenses regarding salary, rent, everything. But right now we are going reverse way. Okay, we are trying to compute the items. We are trying to uh, understand the items which are pertaining to non-cash and non-operating. Remember this word, non-cash and non-operating. Abhi non-cash and non-operating, how will you identify? See, there are few expenses which are non-cash. Can you try to think of any expenses which are non-cash? So I will just give you a brief example. The most important example, you will find it everywhere, right? One is depreciation. Now, why do we call depreciation as a non-cash expense? Because just imagine you have bought a machinery worth 10,000 and then 10% is the depreciation rate per year. So total amount of depreciation for that year would be 10,000 ka 10%, which is 1,000 rupees. But whenever we are computing depreciation, are we paying anyone? There is no movement of cash from your pocket to anybody. So for that reason, we call it as a non-cash expense. It is an expense which we are recording in our book, but then actual flow of money is not there. So we have to make sure that we reverse those entries and derive at the operating activity figure, because remember this is cash flow statement, and cash flow statement will only have items wherein we pay cash, wherein there is an involvement of cash, and not just cash but also bank transactions come into this picture. So another example for non-cash item is amortization. As you all know what is amortization. Just like depreciation, depreciation is on tangible assets which you can see, feel or touch, but amortization is charged only on intangible goods like goodwill or trademarks or anything like that. So that is non-cash items. Now non-operating items would be the items which are something which are not which are computed already but do not belong to the day-to-day business, non-operating. So like usually try to think of different activities like which are not really required for operations of business in the sense running of business. So this is the way we proceed with the question. We have the net profit balance. Now we'll adjust the non-cash and non-operating items from this list. Okay, so we'll move on with the question again. So first, what did we do here? We wrote the profit figure here, and we are trying to compute the profit figure. Okay, profit before tax and extraordinary items. So we got 30,000 as retained earnings of this year, and provision for tax. What is provision for tax? There is some amount of money you are taking out of your retained earnings, and then you are just keeping it as a provision for the next year of tax or current year of tax. So this is the amount you are using it, in the sense इससे आपका profit reduce हुआ है, which means actually you have earned more. So we'll add it because you already deducted previously and derived at net profit. Now we'll add it back. So provision for tax, it is already given in the question. If you actually check at the point number B, provision for tax charged in 2006, means it was already charged in 2006, 35,000. Provision means you are creating a provision out of your amount of money you have. Okay, so 65,000, which means 30,000 plus 35,000 is the 65,000. Now premium on issue of debentures, we also see in the question that there was a premium issued on issue of debentures. So you can see the point number C, the debentures were issued at a premium of 5%. But how will you compute? Because आपके पास यहाँ पे कोई amount नहीं है. How will you do that? So we'll look at the balance sheet quickly. So if we see that there is one column 8% debentures, and when we see the opening balance is 0 and the closing balance is 2 lakh, what do you understand by that? What do you understand by that? We understand that during the year, in the start of the year there was nothing, and now it's 2 lakh, which means that a total of 2 lakh rupees of debentures were raised, right? So we got our amount from here. So we'll now proceed with this, right? Just a second now. Apologies. Yeah, so premium on issue of debentures was at 5%, and the total amount was 2 lakh rupees. So 2 lakh ka 5% would be 10,000 rupees. So it is premium on issue of debentures. We paid premium on issue of debentures. Debentures issue karna is a financing activity, and you don't, I mean, debenture issue, if you are issuing debenture and then receiving premium, so that is not something we can add it back to the cash flows of our presenting. So we have to reduce that amount. Then after computing this 65,000 minus 10,000, we arrive at this figure called net profit before tax and extraordinary items. Now extraordinary items we have understood. Now we'll write this figure over here in the table. It is written 55,000. Now we have to make adjustments for non-cash items as well. Non-operating activities we have done because this is non-operating provision for tax, issue premium on issue of debentures, it comes in financing activity. So we have already made changes for that. Now we have to look at non-cash items. Non-cash items like depreciation or amortization. We'll quickly go through the question and find if there is any depreciation charge. So we see this point, depreciation charged on machinery was 30,000. Okay, which means total depreciation paid was 30,000. So you quickly write down that depreciation amount of 30,000 here, because why are we writing it? Because it has reduced your profit before. Now you are adding it back to your profit. This is 85,000, and the figure which we will call it as is the operating profit before working capital changes. Just don't get confused. We are deriving at profit, say operating profit, but now we also have to consider working capital changes. Means we have to make few adjustments in our working capital, which will help us arrive at the figure called operating profit, which is cash outflow from operations, which is what we are trying to look out at. Okay, so now, to understand this particular aspect of cash flow statement, is actually one of the most trickiest part. But I am very thankful that my teachers taught me one simple example, and I'm still like one simple shortcut or trick that I'm still using, and it's so convenient that I would like to explain the same thing to you, and you will also start finding this cash flow statement computation, especially the operating activities part, very simple. Okay, so we'll quickly glance through what is that technique. Okay, I'm scrolling it here. I hope the screen is visible to all of you. Okay, so remember this code word A L L A, increase, decrease, increase, decrease. Whenever you're starting the question, you can write it in your notes, this thing. So in the same format, we have to write here add, less, less, add, and increase, decrease. These four things you write. Then first two columns you just write current liabilities. In the second two columns you just write current assets. Now how will it help you? So first thing, before coming to this section, I had to ask you, but I forgot kind of. So what is the formula for working capital and what is working capital? So what is working capital? I will explain you. Working capital is the amount of money which a business requires to continue its day-to-day operations. So to continue its day-to-day operations, there is a minimum amount of money definitely required for any business. Just try to imagine. So working capital is that amount which is needed by the business. So how do you compute working capital? What is the formula of working capital? It's very simple. So we'll just write a shortcut here. WC, which is working capital, is equal to current assets. Remember, current assets minus current liabilities. So this is the formula which we are looking at. And then similar way में जब we have in the question that operating profit before working capital changes, now we have to make changes in working capital, which means we have to make changes in our current assets and current liabilities. So now which we understood this method ALLA, increase decrease, we are writing down here add, less add, increase decrease again, and then we have written liabilities twice here, then assets twice here. And now you understand how will we proceed with the question. Okay, remember this point. Increase in current liabilities. How will current liability increase? How will you get to know? You look at the balance sheet. You look at that key, what all item is there, what all items usually come under current liabilities. Bills payable, or creditors, we would say sundry creditors, or different items comes under current liabilities. So we have to check what has what has changed during the year for those current liabilities and current assets. So I think this might go a bit over your mind maybe, but if we look at the example now, the example question, you will clearly be able to understand. Okay, so we'll also look at this part as well. So first we'll proceed to the cash flow statement. Okay, to the question part. So right now in the balance sheet, First, we'll proceed with the current liabilities because we had this thing in the list, right? So we'll see in the liabilities which are the current liabilities. Share capital, is it a liability? Is it a liability? Can you recall? No, it's not a liability. It's actually your share capital. So share capital do not form part of your liability, but it's part of your equity. So debentures is a liability, but debentures, is it a short term or a long term liability? It's a long term because debentures we take for a longer period, at least more than 1 year. Retained earnings is not a liability. And now we look at this item called creditors. So what are creditors? Creditors are current liabilities. Now I hope you all know the basics of these questions. So what we are currently seeing here, that at the start of the year we had 40,000 worth of creditors, and at the end of the year we have 1 lakh creditors, which means what is the difference? 60,000. So has it increased or decreased? It has increased, means 40,000 से 1 lakh हुआ है, तो there is an increase of 60,000. When we look at the this part, we our format, whenever there is an increase in current liabilities, you have to add that amount. जब आपने ये देखा अभी 60,000 increase हुआ, which means you will have to add that amount. When we look at the solution part here, we see that there is an increase in creditors, and he has also done the same computation and derived at 60,000 the figure, and it has also added the same. Now we'll see the next item in the balance sheet, which we see that it's bills payable. Bills payable means you have to pay an amount to someone. So it's a short term liability for you. So what we see that a 20,000 amount is there, and it has become 40,000, which means there is again an increase in current liability. And as per our sheet, ayyo, just 1 second. Apologies for this. Kind of using it quickly. So again, we saw that there is an increase in current liabilities. When we saw bills payable, it was 20,000 and it has increased to 40,000. If at all it has increased, then what can we do? We have to add it again. So in the same way, in the question, it has added increase in bills payable, which is net increase is 20,000, and same has been added. Now we have looked at all the items in the balance sheet on the liability side. We only found out two liabilities, which two short-term liabilities, which is creditors and bills payable. Now we will have to look at the asset side. Assets में अपने को find out करना है current assets क्या है. We clearly know goodwill is an intangible assets, and intangible plus it's a long-term asset. It's not a current assets, right? Then machinery is definitely again a long-term asset. Now we derive at the stock figure. Stock at the start of the year was 20,000. At the end of the year was 80,000. But there are also few things mentioned about the stock here. Like if you actually read this additional information provided, during 2006, the business of a sole trader was purchased by issuing shares of 2 lakh. We can ignore this part. Assets acquired from him were goodwill. You can ignore this as well. Machinery and stock of rupees 50,000 was acquired. So we are actually right now focused on stock na. तो अपन अपना purview should only keep to stock, or else the question will confuse you. Okay. So assets were acquired from that sole trader by this by Suryan Limited. Okay, so we'll have to check how will this 50,000 impact. We see that 20,000 is the opening balance, 80,000 is the closing balance, but there is also an acquired. Matlab, now I'll try to explain this point to you. Like at the start of the year, we had 20,000 worth of stock, and now at the end of the year, we have 80,000 worth of stock, which means there is a chance that we might have purchased 60,000 worth of stock, 60,000, but there is an increase in 60,000 doesn't mean we have paid cash for everything. There is this point tries to mention that 50,000 was acquired from someone, acquired from the sole trader. Does that mean did we pay cash for it or not? So we'll try to look in the solution and understand more clearly. Okay. So now when we see increase in stock, remember increase in asset, we are looking at increase in current asset. Whatever the increase will be, we have to reduce this amount, right? You can see this point less here. Whenever there is an increase in asset, we have to reduce. Abhi we are seeing the stock part. Now stock has increased, so we know we have to reduce that amount, but by how much is what we have to understand. Okay, so we'll try to look at here. So first is increase in stock. Just a second. Apologies. So yeah, increase in stock. We saw that 80,000 was the opening stock, sorry, closing stock, and 50,000 was the amount of stock which the business has received from acquiring. So we cannot actually, we did not pay cash for that. And 20,000 was already opening. तो हमने जो देखा था, I'll mention here, 80,000 was the stock at the end of the year, 20,000 was at the start of the year. Okay, which means what we assumed that during the year during the year 60,000 worth of stock was purchased is what we assumed, but when we looked at the additional information, we found out that 50,000 was acquired from somewhere else, so we have to reduce that 50,000 as well. So when we reduce that 50,000, what we find is that, just one second now, what we find is that 10,000 is the balancing figure, 60,000 minus 50,000. Now 10,000 increase हुआ है, increase, and when we looked at that table, we understand that whenever there is an increase in current asset, we have to deduct it. Same way में increase in stock, we have to deduct that amount by 10,000. I hope you are able to get this, and I am reiterating this because we also had students from junior batches as well, so they might get confused. I know senior batches will easily be able to correlate my example and understand that. Okay, now we'll move on to the next item in the balance sheet. We'll check what is there. Okay, so next item what we see is debtors. So is debtor a current asset? Definitely it is. So definitely debtors are current assets, so we'll try to look at debtors angle as well. So what we saw here in the question was debtors in the start of the year were 30,000 and at the end of the year were 1 lakh, which means again there is an increase of how much? 70,000. But remember, always check additional information for every item, क्योंकि there can be such questions wherein they give some they intentionally give some additional information for the question and your answer will not be right. So for debtors, when we check the point number 1, the asset acquired from him also included debtors of rupees 30,000. I hope now you understand what we are looking at. So now we'll move on to the sheet to understand very well. Just remember 3 figures in your mind. One is stock of 20,000, which is opening stock, and then closing stock is 80,000, and stock which we got, sorry, I'm really sorry, we are looking at debtors and I'm talking about stock. Okay, so debtors opening balance was 30,000 and closing balance was 1 lakh, and then we looked at the figure of 30,000 of debtors from acquired from the sole trader. Okay, now when we try to compute this in the same way, we'll look here, don't look at the answer right now. Okay, so first apne ko opening balance nahi, closing balance was 1 lakh. Okay, 1 lakh worth of debtors at the end of the year. I'll just write it here. Okay, I hope you'll be able to understand, don't worry. Then we also had 30,000 as the opening balance. So usually what we assume that closing balance minus opening balance, if we do, will arrive at the figure of current year's debtors. Just 1 second. There is an error in the formula. It's showing 1,30,000 despite we putting up a minus figure here. We'll add it. Okay, now it shows 70,000. We assume it to be 70,000 increase, but in reality, is it 70,000 increase? No, actually, there is a 30,000. Like it is an increase of 70,000, but have we paid cash for entire 70,000? No, we have not paid. And whenever we are dealing with cash flow statement, we have to make sure that we are only dealing with items which are related to cash, which we are paying using cash and all. So again, now we'll see this is the balance which we derived, and this is the amount of debtors we received from the sole trader. So for this, we did not pay any cash. So that's why it should not be a part of our cash flow statement. So this is the again this formula is going error. Okay, don't mind, guys. Okay, let's just ignore that. So we'll have this answer here 40,000. Okay, so 70,000 minus 30,000 equal to 40,000, and we can see the same figure over here. And why is it in minus? Because debtors are current assets, and whenever there is increase in current assets, we have to make sure that it is deducted. So this table is something you can take a screenshot of. You can actually note it down. It will always help you. We saw that there was an increase in current liabilities. We added them. There was a decrease in, there was no decrease in current liabilities. And then we saw there was increase in current assets. So even we have to add that part as well. So these are the few things you have to take care. And then when we look at our sheet, now we have actually derived at the point cash outflow from operations. Means operations say this was the cash outflow. Means this was the amount which we have taken out like which we have received actually 1,15,000. Whenever the balance is in positive, it's the receipt part. Okay. Now, what we look at is income tax paid, which is 25,000. Now we have to see what are the entries for income tax. I am not going through entirety of ledger accounts because I am assuming you guys would have a general idea about how ledger works, how ledger items are, right? Okay. So we'll look at the item regarding tax. So there we see that provision for tax is there, and then we also see that there is a provision for tax charge in 2006 of 35,000. Means तीन चीजें अपने को दिख रही है. Opening provision for tax was 30,000, closing was 40,000, and provision for tax used during the year was 35,000. Now we have to derive that the actual income tax paid during the year, मतलब cash में कितना पैसा दिया अपन ने. So when we look at our workings, we'll go line by line. What we saw is provision for tax amount में first cheese, we saw that opening balance we already had 40,000 from previous year, and this year the ending balance was 40,000. These two data is already provided. And we also saw in the notes, I'll just show it again in the additional information, that there was provision for tax charge in 35,000 for this year in 2006. So what we will do, that provision amount will note down over here. Now whatever the balancing figure will come, we clearly know that that balancing figure is the amount of tax we paid using the cash which we have in our business. So this is the amount we have to look at. So this is what I'm highlighting. You are already able to see the amount of 25,000. When you quickly move through the sheet, cash outflow from operations. So income tax paid. Income tax paid, why are we deducting it? So this is the figure 25,000, and we have deducted this 25,000. After computing everything, we have derived at this figure 90,000, and this figure is called net cash from operating activities. So we'll write it here, net cash from operating activities. Okay, so this is the total net cash. और इसमें और एक चीज ये ट्रिक होती है, whenever the amount is 90,000 and it's a plus sign, whenever an amount is in bracket, we understand that it's a negative figure. that is minus figure. But when it is in positive, which means plus symbol है, तो we have to understand that, देखो net effect क्या रहता है, either there is an inflow of cash because of that activity or outflow of cash. Okay. Yes. So just a second. Hmm. Outflow of cash. If the sign is plus, we know that it is an inflow of cash from that activity. But if the sign is minus, then is outflow of cash. So right now when we saw that 90,000 was positive, which means plus, which means we can also change the heading here, net cash inflow. Okay, inflow from operating activities. Now we'll move on to the other part. See, 90, I won't say 90, but 70% of our solution is done, because operating activities is always a tricky part, and other activities like investing and financing are very easy. It's like peanuts for you. Okay, so we'll just quickly go on to the other part, next part. Just excuse me. Okay, thank you. So we are moving on to the other part, which is called cash flow from investing activities. Okay, investing activities में कौन सी activities आती है? Like operating में हमने देखा कि related to business, we saw current assets, current liabilities. We actually removed items which were non-operating items, right? Like the tax paid part of that, the provision for tax part. So cash paid को भी इसलिए लिया था क्योंकि cash हमने pay किया था in rupees. Okay, so now we are looking at investing activities. So investing activities is something in which you obviously know the definition. We had a really great session that day, and if you have revised the PPT, definitely you know the difference. Investing activities will make sure to spend the money on buying assets. In general sense, we are taking it up. So assets. So when we actually see in our question part, we see that there is a machinery item involved, and we see that the machinery at the start of the year was 1,25,000, and at the end of the year it's 4,75,000. Means there is a huge increase as to opening and closing balances. And what is the thumb rule which we are following whenever we are finding any item and making some adjustments in the in our cash flow statement? We also have to check the additional information. So machinery, if we are finding it here, we'll also try to check here. So we also saw that machinery rupees 1 lakh. You can see, I think, in the additional information part A. So asset which we acquired from sole trader is rupees. Uh, we have acquired different types of assets. So one such asset is machinery, and machinery of rupees 1 lakh. See, goodwill जो है ना, goodwill में क्या है? We have not purchased any goodwill. We have not paid anything for goodwill. We got 20,000 worth of goodwill. उससे ज्यादा कुछ भी changes नहीं हुआ. अगर machinery also would have been the same case. For example, if machine at the start of year was 1,25,000, and at the end of the year it was 2,25,000, which means only 1 lakh increase, then we would have assumed that that 1 lakh machine was something which we got from the sole trader, and we did not pay any cash to him. But that is not the case. Even if you add 1 lakh, this figure will be 2,25,000, and we still have more amount, which is around 2,50,000, which makes 4,75,000. Okay, so it would have been a little break for you as well. So it's a actually turned out to be a good thing only for all of us at the end of the day. So now we are actually looking at the investing activity figure, and then solution में तो direct answer है 2,80,000. You might be confused कि ऐसे कैसे आ गया ये. So we have the working note for this as well. So we'll quickly glance through. Okay. So first thing what we saw, this figure, I think you remember, 1,25,000 straightforwardly mentioned in the question. Whenever the balance, opening balance we write down, we write as balance brought down and 1,25,000. We also know the closing balance 4,75,000. So we'll also have to write the closing balance of 4,75,000. Remember 30,000 was there in the depreciation part. So simply we have to mention it again. And then remember one important point: vendor business purchase means, what we actually try to understand from this point is that machinery account में depreciation तो आता है, we all know, but this figure, balancing figure, why do you have to arrive? Because this was the amount we paid in cash or bank or cash flow में, as we all know that only items purchased during the year, paying money, after paying money, so those items are only the ones which come up here. Okay, so we also mentioned the amount of, actually this should come upwards, but then I have created in such a way, no, not an issue, because I found that information later. So this is the amount which we got from vendor purchase. So you can find that same amount over here: machinery of rupees 1 lakh which we got from the business of sole trader which we purchased. Then we are mentioning that amount. The balancing figure which we got here is 2,80,000, which means 2,80,000 worth of asset was purchased during the year. Only 2,80,000. Rest all was not paid in cash, so it will not come. Others were also assets, but since there were no cash movement, there was no inflow or outflow of cash because of that activity, we have to make sure only the net amount is there. So when we see the investing activity part, cash flows from investing activity, machinery purchase for cash, only the amount 2,80,000. I know it would be a bit complex thing for all of you to learn at one go, but then this video will be helpful, and then as you learn ledger accounts more often, you'll be able to easily be able to, definitely I'm telling you, easily be able to understand these concepts. Now we'll note this down, because once we have done the operating activity part, now we have to do the investing activity part. Investing में हमने amount आया है इसमें minus 2,80,000. Okay, now one rule, if you remember, inflow of cash अगर है तो पॉजिटिव साइन आएगा, आउटफ्लो ऑफ कैश है मतलब मशीन के लिए जेब में से पैसे निकाल के दिए, which means you have paid for that machine, which is 2,80,000. Okay, 2,80,000 means net cash outflow, because inflow अगर होता तो पैसे अपने जेब में आते, but to purchase machine, net cash outflow from investing activity. To purchase the machine, we have to pay out to the vendor, and we only paid 2,80,000 as cash. Actual तो machine और भी है अपने पास, but we have only paid cash इतना amount का. Okay, I'll just quickly make a format here so that it looks good for all of us, and you can also note it down. Anyway, it's not that needed, but still, yeah. Then we are looking at the third activity. What was the third activity? Quickly recall, quickly. Okay, I hope you answered it correctly. So it is cash flows from financing activity, and you can also see it here. Then we have to make sure what are financing activities. What are financing activities? Anything which is bringing in money for you or flowing out money from your organization regarding investments in the sense either issue of shares, or the low investments would actually come in investing activity, my mistake, sorry. But then when company is receiving money in terms of finance, be it loans के form में या issue of shares के form में, like people who are not having a idea about this thing, like whenever we issue shares, so the company receives money, and whenever they issue debentures is also type of a loan. Means मैं बैंक के पास गया, मैंने लोन मांगा, and bank has paid me some money, which means there is an inflow of money in my business. Now we'll look at different items in financing activities. You'll learn right now you might not be able to easily find them through this question itself, because it needs a bit of practice, but as you practice you will get habituated, and you will yourself be able to gauge that okay, this is something financing activity, this is investing activity. So whenever we go line by, like we saw assets and all when we tried to calculate operating activities. In the same way, we can see share capital. Now we know it is something related to financing activities. Same way mein debentures, it is something related to financing activities. Your mind will open up. Naturally, it will open up. Okay. So first we saw that there is 1 lakh worth of share capital already there. मतलब 1 लाख के shares already issued है public में. And then 4 lakh is the amount at the end of the year. And then what is the increase? 3 lakh rupees. Is there any detail? We have to check it as usual. Like what is the additional information provided? And first we'll only look at share capital. Share capital means stocks. And if we see the first point, we also received stock worth 50,000. Means स्टॉक वर्थ 50,000 मिला है, लेकिन स्टॉक के पैसे 50,000 नहीं मिले. बिजनेस एक्वायर किया, मैंने 2 लाख रुपए दिए थे पूरा बिजनेस एक्वायर करने के लिए. विथ बिजनेस आई एम गेटिंग ऑल एसेट्स ऑल लाइबिलिटीज, एंड लाइबिलिटीज के फॉर्म में मुझे क्रेडिटर्स मिलेंगे और दूसरी चीजें मिलेगी. बट एसेट्स के फॉर्म में जैसे गुडविल, मशीनरी, स्टॉक्स, डेटार्स, those things we have received. Okay, so we have to make necessary adjustments with that. So if we saw that share capital opening is 1 lakh, closing is 4 lakhs, and 50,000 is the uh, amount which we received. Okay, we'll quickly glance through. Yes. So cash proceeds from issue of shares, 1 lakh rupees. Why did we get only 1 lakh rupees as the amount? Why? So we have to check the note number 4 to understand its computation. Okay. So we made this note number 4, which is share capital account. Share capital account के अंदर अपने को सब डेटा मिल जाता है. So first we write down the opening and closing balances. So this is 1 lakh. We have written down straightforward वहां से, and 4 lakh is the closing balance. Okay, closing balance. Now we have to make sure this is balanced, right? 4 lakh is 4 lakh. दोनों साइड 4 लाख आए. But remember, लाइक जब वेंडर से बिजनेस परचेस किया था, तो शेयर कैपिटल अकाउंट में अपने को we actually paid using providing shares. Okay, if you check this point clearly, like during 2006, the business of a sole trader was purchased by issuing shares. मीन्स वी डिड नॉट पे हिम कैश. यूजुअली क्या होता है कि भाई मैं तुमको पैसे दे रहा हूं, तुम मुझे बिजनेस दे दो. बट इन दिस केस व्हाट वी डिड, वी इशूड शेयर्स टू हिम. उसको बोले कि हमारी कंपनी है सूर्यान लिमिटेड, उसके शेयर्स हम आपको देंगे और 2 लाख रुपए के शेयर्स देंगे. तो विच मीन्स दैट वी इशूड शेयर्स, but we did not receive any money. I hope you are able to understand. My name Darpan. Okay, I have my company. I want to purchase something. I can either give you cash, I can give you something else, or in return. So in this case, no cash was paid. Instead, shares were paid. Share amount was paid. Okay, so might be a bit toss for you, but it's a simple thing. You'll understand. Okay. सो वेंडर को परचेस के लिए 2 लाख रुपए कैश देने के जगह, कैश वी डिड नॉट गिव. वी डिड नॉट गिव. वी रादर पेड यूजिंग स्टॉक्स. इसको बोले स्टॉक्स ले लो और हमको बिजनेस दे दो. सो दैट 2 लाख कैनॉट बी कैश. वी कैनॉट राइट कि 3 लाख का हमने शेयर्स इश्यू किया था. नाउ वी सी दैट इधर 3 lakhs ही है, और ऑन द अदर साइड वी हैव 4 lakhs. जस्ट 1 minute guys, I am getting an urgent call. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Okay. I hope I'm audible again. I'll just mute and unmute. Yeah, okay. So I hope you got this point. Like 4 lakh was the balance, and then 1 lakh was the opening balance. 2 lakh rupees of shares we have issued instead of paying for cash. 1 lakh is the amount we received for issue of shares. We issued shares to people. We are assuming it. We issued shares to people, and those people have paid us 1 lakh rupees. That means अपने को पैसा in आया है, and whenever there is a cash and bank transaction, we have this thumb rule that it will be included in financing activities. So cash proceed from issue of shares 1 lakh rupees. I hope this point is very clear to you. Now we looked at financing activity. Now we look at the second part, cash proceed from issue of debentures. So debentures का 2,10,000 figure कैसे आया? Again we have to compute. So first we'll have a look at the question. Okay, so the question here is debentures 8%. Remember start of the year एक भी debenture नहीं था अपने पास, zero debentures we had, but at the end of the year we have 2 lakh worth of debentures, which means that we took 8% debenture का लोन ही समझो इसको, इन इट्स नॉट एग्जैक्टली a loan I would say, but it's a long term liability. So debentures are a long term liability. 8% is the interest rate. And we also have to check again that is there any additional information regarding debentures. So first here तो there is no information because goodwill है, machinery है, stock है, debtors है, all of them we have checked. Provision for tax we have done. The point number C we have to see debentures were issued at a premium of 5%, which is not included in the retained earnings. Okay, so what we have to see that debentures जब भी issue करते हैं ना, either they are issued at discount or at premium. If they are issued at premium, which means people are paying you extra money for the same amount of debentures. 2 लाख तो एक्चुअल debentures है, लेकिन उसके ऊपर प्रीमियम 10,000 रुपए. 10,000 भी कैसे अपन डिराइव कर रहे हैं, विल क्विकली सी इन दी क्वेश्चन. Okay, just remember the figure. Opening balance was 0, closing balance is 2 lakh, and the premium was 5%. Okay, just a second now. Okay, we'll look at the note number 5. Okay, it's a very easy note. It's matlab no complications also. Debenture issued, what we saw, start of the year 0 the, and at the end of the year we have 2 lakh, which means there is a net increase of 2 lakh, and 2 lakh are the new debentures. 5% premium on issue of debentures. So we have to compute 2 lakh into 5%. So that amount come out as 10,000, which means we also received 10,000 rupees extra paisa. We received extra 10,000. So 2 lakh was the debenture face value pay. We issued at premium 10,000. We received amount of 2 lakh 10,000. So this direct figure we have to write it here, 2 lakh 10,000. And the total figure for financing activities, we have almost checked all the items in our balance sheet. There are two items left, which is cash in hand and bank. We'll look at that as well. So before moving to that part, we'll make sure to compute the financing activity part. So 2 lakh 10,000 plus 1 lakh. So total is 3 lakh 10,000 net cash flows from financing activity. अभी वापस से अपने को टेबल पे जाना है. So this 3 lakh 10,000 which we have again. So what will we write here? 3 lakh 10,000 positive figure tha, so positive figure we are writing here. So now you have to tell me, is it an inflow or outflow of cash? Try to recall. Whenever we have a positive figure, we have to make we can assume that it's certain that it's an inflow of cash. Okay, so we'll write it down here. Net cash inflow from फाइनेंसिंग एक्टिविटीज मींस अपन ने अभी तीनों एक्टिविटी देख ली है. वी हैव चेक्ड ऑल 3 एक्टिविटीज. नाउ वी हैव टू मूव ऑन. इनका नेट फिगर क्या आएगा? Net figure in the sense this अपन ने जो भी एक्टिविटी देखी, can you recall this thing that it was pertaining to the year 2006 only for this year, only for 2006. So we have to come out at a net balance. Net balance in the sense add all these. So we'll derive at that figure of this thing. Yes. So 1,20,000, which is the figure. Now this figure is again positive, means there was overall inflow of cash. तीन type की activities थी. One activity ensured that inflow is there. Second activity से outflow हुआ. Third activity से again inflow हुआ. Okay. So the net cash inflow during the year, we'll name it by this because from all the activities, it is from all the activities, sum total of all the activities. Okay, so I'm not making a table here right now, not much needed, you will be easily be able to relate. So this again, this figure is 1,20,000 already here, right? 1,20,000 कैश इस साल हम लोग ने जमा किया, कैश or cash equivalents, cash या cash equivalents or cash or bank, every figure. So 1,20,000 was for this year. Now next what item we see, like 95% of our task is done. Just one, just a minute task is remaining. So now we have to check, like increase in cash and cash equivalents for this year was 1,20,000, the figure which we got. The cash and cash equivalents at the beginning of the year means हमने जो balances check नहीं किए थे, this is the cash in hand and cash at bank. What we have to check, only the opening balance, don't have to check the closing balance. Closing balance हमको बनाना होता है, opening balance we have to see what is there. So 50,000 is cash at bank and cash at hand is 25,000, which means total कितना हो गया, 75,000 opening cash and cash equivalents. और equivalents का definition भी बहुत diverse होता है, तो you will learn it later, but at the moment it's not needed. Okay, so that cash equivalent word is very different, but cash and bank and cash at hand दोनों भी अपने को अभी important है, and opening balances of these. So now we have understood total 75,000 is there as the figure. So we are adding that 75,000 cash and cash equivalents at the beginning of the year, which is 75,000, and total cash and cash equivalents. This is the final figure which we have to arrive. This is 1,20,000 plus 75,000. मतलब this year का inflow या outflow जो भी होता है, this year का plus opening balance. So which we derive at the cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year. The figure here is 1,95,000, right? If we want to cross verify any time, if you want to cross check if the answer is correct or not, you have to check cash equivalents के ending balances. So we see that cash at bank is 1,50,000, cash in hand is 45. 45 means 45,000 I'm talking about. So we'll write it here, 1,50,000 and 45,000. These are the closing balances. And if we add these two, the figure should come as cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year. And if we see these two balances are matching, this means you can self-correct yourself in the exam as well. So that is a good technique that you can use. Okay. So all in all, this was our session on cash flow statements. I know things could have been very new to all of you, and might be that you must have not been able to relate to some concepts, but we tried our best. And it's something you don't learn over one day. मतलब you can't really learn in one day. It needs a lot of practice, and that is what we want you all to do. Like even at FactSet, when we work during all our like we are a financial information company, so we need to have knowledge of these things. And as I already told you that what do you call us, that these Sorry, I'm stammering a bit. So financial statements are really important, and cash flow statement is part of the this thing, financial statement. It is an important part, and you have to learn that. And since you guys are working on a project as well, so I hope this session was really fruitful to all of you, and you have made a most out of it. So my name is Darpan, and I am team leader at management trainee at FactSet, to be a team leader maybe in few months. So I am also in a learning phase, just like all of you. So I just hope you all keep learning. Just love the process of learning, and then you'll really, you'll start enjoying solving these questions. Don't take them as a, call it as something which is you are not able to understand it. In the start it's very difficult, but once you learn it, you will definitely love accounts, be it accounts, finance, everything. So I just hope that you keep continue, because you are still at a very young age and a dynamic age to even decide as to what careers to choose. But then still I feel that if you are focusing on something and developing interest into finance, then FactSet always has doors open for all of you. And the last, I would like to thank the CSR, corporate responsibility team at FactSet, and also all the organizations which have made sure that this event like this was possible, made possible by your efforts. I hope everyone understood a lot from this, learned a lot, and this is also a great experience for people like us, fact setters, executives. So thank you so much. Bye. Enjoy your day. Enjoy learning. Thank you.